Hello and welcome to The Learning Post, a podcast dedicated to sharing insights from the UK Ed Match and UK Ed Direct funds. My name is Jem Clark and I'm the Senior Performance Manager for UK Ed Direct and your host for this episode. This episode focuses on Small Charities Challenge Fund grant holder Seenaryo and its play-based learning project in Lebanon. Speaking to Naqiya, Ebrahim, Chief Operating Officer at Seenaryo, we discuss the benefits of play-based learning and some of the challenges that the project has faced over the last 6 months. Thanks for joining us today, Naqiya. To start with, can you tell us a bit about Seenaryo and your Small Charities Challenge Fund project?
Thank you for having me, Jem. Seenaryo started initially as a community theatre project. In the years after the Syrian civil war began, we were seeing an influx of refugees entering Lebanon and noticing that the focus of aid was almost exclusively towards satisfying basic needs, so food, shelter, healthcare. Now, obviously, these things are crucial, but we felt very strongly there was an urgent need for projects that went beyond these needs. So projects that support personal development, that foster cohesion between different communities and allow people's stories to be heard. So we started running theatre projects in refugee camps and communities. And as we gained momentum, we were approached by schools who wanted to know if we could do something for them as well. We discovered very quickly that what we were doing in communities was needed and wanted just as much in the classroom. So that's actually how our project with UK Aid came about. Our visits to schools led us to design the Seenaryo Play Kit, which is a library essentially of games, songs, and interactive stories, all of which are linked to standard kindergarten curricula and all hosted on a mobile phone app that we've developed. So now we train teachers in how to use the app and the activities within it to support them in getting their children up from their desks and immersed in their learning. UK Aid is now supporting us to further develop the app as well as to reach more schools and bring play-based learning to thousands more children in Lebanon.
I'm curious about the sort of scale you mentioned. Can you give us a sense of scale of perhaps this project and also where that sits within Seenaryo's wider work?
What's brilliant about training teachers rather than working directly with children is I can train 5 teachers to learn how to use play-based learning in their classroom. And then those 5 teachers are then each reaching 25 children at a time. And so what's been really exciting is now through the Play Kit, we've reached over 1,000 teachers who in turn are reaching 30,000 children. We work in Jordan as well, so this is across Lebanon and Jordan, and it's really exciting to know that we can have that type of scale.
Brilliant, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the benefits of play-based learning?
I think for me, the strength of play is the high human interaction, which is really crucial for life skills development. I think globally, we're all understanding that life skills, so for example, communication, collaboration, decision-making, are far more important than the need to boost academic achievement. And in fact, you can't really boost academic achievement without first fostering these types of skills. Before we developed the Play Kit, I remember we were invited to visit a kindergarten classroom in the Bekaa Valley, which is in the east of Lebanon. And I was struck by seeing all of these very small children sitting at their desks, looking up at their teachers with books in front of them. It was astonishing because there was no sense of movement or play. They were there to just sit and listen. Now, globally, we know this is not the most productive way to teach children, but in certain communities, I think there's still this fallacy when it comes to learning that if children are well behaved, sitting at their desks and copying from the board, then that's a productive style of education. By complete contrast, I visited the classroom of a teacher who had recently been trained in using the Play Kit. I forget his name now, annoyingly, but she had a boy in her class who was hiding under a table, refusing to come out. And she had told me before I went in that she'd been finding it hard to get this child to engage and cooperate with the other children, but that some of the Play Kit activities had been helping. So she started playing one of our games. It's called Touch or Jump. She'd laid out objects on a line on the floor, all beginning with a different letter of the alphabet. So if the object began with a letter they were learning that day, I think it was harf al-ba, which is the letter B in English, children would touch it. If it didn't begin with that letter, they would jump over it. She had it all set up and the children started playing, but my eyes were just glued to this boy who was sitting under that table. I could see his face slowly becoming curious. He was watching his peers and smiling, and eventually crawled out from under the table and started to join in. I really think when you turn learning into a fun, welcoming, engaging environment, children, they can't help but come on board and learn with you. And for me, that is the power of play.
Great. Thanks, Naqiya. Really, really interesting. I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on the age ranges that the Play Kit targets and the rationale around that.
Sure. So when we designed the Play Kit, we decided to focus on 3 to 8-year-olds. The reason for this is we've noticed that this age group is really where the least resources are spent. And it's very strange because actually in early childhood is when you have the most potential for development and to really change the architecture of your brain. I think the Nobel-winning economist James Heckman actually said that for every dollar that a government invests in the education of a child under the age of 5, you see a 13% return in gross domestic product. This is when interventions need to be happening. And what's incredibly surprising, I think, is that people believe that anyone can teach kindergarten. You kind of get a mum in a room with some children and she does her thing. And that's kind of how it's treated, when actually it is, I think, one of the hardest age groups to teach and where we really need to be putting our focus.
Having trained as a kindergarten teacher myself, I completely agree with you 100%. I've worked with a lot of different age groups, and that was by far the most challenging. When you put it like that, why does this seem like such a radical idea then in so many contexts?
I don't know the answer to that. I think you're right. And it's important for us not to categorize play as a radical approach. In 1837, I think it was, Friedrich Froebel coined the word kindergarten, which means children's garden. So he didn't call his kindergarten a school, but rather a play and activity institute. Then 60 years later, in the early 1900s, you had Maria Montessori, who was strongly advocating for play and child-centered learning. So these ideas are not new. They're not radical. It's what we've all known for hundreds of years. But I think we've become distracted as academic emphasis intensified through the 20th century with a huge escalation of testing. But in many ways, I think what education experts are circling back to is what Froebel knew all along in the 1800s. It's nothing new.
In a setting like Lebanon, you've got a challenging contextual landscape and political and financial instability at the moment. So maybe you could expand a little bit more on why, in that particular context, this seems like such an effective approach.
Well, I really think that it's in contexts like Lebanon where play-based and child-centered learning is kind of most important. You know, for a child who is going through upheaval in their lives, potentially suffering from toxic stress, to expect them to be able to focus on maths and literacy via rote learning sitting at their desks is kind of a delusion. And I want to clarify, I'm not saying math and literacy should be left to the wayside or that they're not important. It's more about how those subjects are taught, what is actually needed to help that child learn what they need to learn. I think children in these contexts, first and foremost, need to learn to self-regulate their emotions and cope with setbacks. And play is really a perfect way to develop those types of skills. When you're following the rules of a game, you're learning to self-regulate. You know, when your team doesn't win, you're developing resilience. With a tactical game, you're problem solving and making decisions. I think these skills are especially relevant as we enter a creative economy. You know, today's job market is so much less reliant on traditional skills, reading, writing, arithmetic. What we're interested in is creative skills, life skills. I think Forbes says the top 10 skills employees will need include problem solving, which I just talked about, creativity, emotional intelligence, decision making. I think if we want to prepare children in Lebanon to be change makers in their own life, then play is exactly where we should begin.
Thanks, Naqiya. So the project's been up and running for 6 months. What have been some of the challenges you've faced so far, and how have you overcome them?
In the last few months, I think the biggest challenge for any organization working in education, or maybe in any sector, has obviously been COVID. School closures have meant that teachers are having to find ways to teach and play remotely. Now, in our context, getting children on Zoom or a Microsoft Teams meeting just hasn't been an option. Many of the children that our teachers work with have only one device at home, which, if I'm allowed to generalize, normally needs to be used by dad for work. Electricity cuts in Lebanon have also meant that getting that one device charged and connected to the internet for a child to be online at a very specific time during the day is practically an impossibility. So we needed to find a way for teachers to teach a playful lesson without the teacher or children having to be online at a particular time. The best way, I think, to overcome this was for teachers to send video lessons to the children for them to download in watching their own time. So when that one device is free and they happen to have electricity. But we wanted to avoid being in a situation where a child is passively listening and watching a video. This would obviously go against everything we've been talking about, everything we've been trying to accomplish with the Play Kit. So I think once we'd worked that out, we realized we needed to develop a new training, a training which focused on showing teachers how they can design a video lesson, which left space for children to participate and play, even though the teacher isn't there to kind of monitor them live and show them what to do. For example, in the video, they're not there, but they're asking the child, okay, go and find objects in your house, and leaving a gap, leaving space for them to go and do this. And then once they've come back, giving them the next set of instructions. We were even giving teachers ideas for saying to the child, pause the video, go and do this thing, then come back. So really showing them how to craft a lesson that involves play without them being there live. And we were really lucky it was successful, and it made sure that children were still learning and playing at home. Luckily, schools are back in session now, and so we're back with normal live Play Kit trainings, which is definitely our preference. But it's good to know that we have that up our sleeve when needed.
You mentioned the sort of, this has been successful. How do you measure what success is with this kit?
We are always going back to the schools that we work with and getting teachers to give us feedback. So we have focus group discussions with all of the teachers that we train. Beyond that, we've also been working with an external company to kind of design an M&E tool that we've been piloting. So teachers are responding to specific questions so that we have metrics that we can measure against in terms of what was happening before the training, what's been happening post-implementation. We've also been trying to get data from children themselves. So we've been using a tool called the IDELA, which measures children's development. So there's sort of certain developmental milestones. We will do a series of tests with that child before the Play Kit has been used in the classroom, and then come back to that same specific child and see how they have developed. It's tricky, I will say, with stuff like that, because you can never be sure how much of their development is natural development versus progression in school generally versus actually Play Kit impact. So it's a tricky thing. And I think what we try and do is just make sure we have lots of different points of contact with the school, with the children, so that we can continually assess how we're doing.
Great. Thanks, Naqiya, for chatting. Really, really interesting. How do people find out more if they are interested?
You can head on over to our website at Seenaryo, spelled SEENARYO.org. Anyone is also welcome to download the Seenaryo Play Kit app on the Google Play and Apple stores. So do check us out.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Learning Post so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for listening.